there are three things. It's very simple by way of introduction. In 2008, we were putting together an issue called The Big Green Issue. It's this one, which was our, if you like, ecological issue. And as happens quite often with the magazine, we advertise in advance and then we wait and things come through the post. The most extraordinary things. That happens every time. We never know what is going to come. And typically it is actually worldwide because of email and because of this international republic of letters, which we like to think of ourselves as at least belonging to. Things, really good things, come in from all over the world. In the case of this issue, we had the complete surprise, and I can say with some shame now that we'd never heard of either Alan Prowl, nor to our chagrin now really, had we heard of Rocco Scottolaro. So Rocco Scottolaro came to us through the post in Alan Prowl's translation. 17 poems is sufficient to go into this issue as a substantial part of it. We understood the ecological issue itself in this particular number as how you treat the land, really, and an injustice done to people, a sort of steady injustice done to the people to whom the land rightfully belongs. We thought of it as an ecological issue. And Scottolaro is your champion in that respect and representative as well. So we were very glad to have him in. And Modern Poetry in Translation has, as it were, it's gone on again and again under its own success in a certain sense. Poems like that gave us the idea of wanting to do a proper Scottolaro pamphlet. And that is what happened with this, some copies of which are still left. That's the first of the MPT poets. He suits me down to the ground, this poet. He's got sort of an awful lot of things which one loves and admires, and as a writer also envies him being able to do. He has a local habitation. He actually belongs somewhere. He's rooted somewhere. He matters locally. He knows things inside out. He knows the locality. He knows the problems of it. He knows the beauties of it. He knows the people. And it's that rootedness which really gives the poetry its life. It's actually rooted in a reality which he perfectly well understood. Very fraught in lots of ways. The book I came across, which you all know, I'm sure, in Oxfam in Aberystwyth, is this extraordinary Christ's Doctors, Ebruli, Carlo Levi's book in a fantastic translation by Francis Frenet. And reading that and knowing of his connection with Scottolaro, things start to fall into place. As this being an area now under time, a time under place, when things were underway, which not exactly ending happily, one can't say that, but there were sort of forces, definitely good forces, as Mussolini's fascism came to an end, as the war cart started, and there seemed the possibility of a sort of proper and just distribution of land, and there was a poet at the heart of it, and an absolutely first-class artist, Carlo Levi as well, from totally different ends of the social spectrum. The one from a rich, prosperous Jewish family, used to that sort of thing, Carlo Levi, coming down and then giving his services in exile. The only time he ever practiced, he trained as a doctor, and without the necessary qualifications, then the situation was so wretched in the area in Lucania where he was exiled that he practiced, and it was, as it were, better than nothing. And he practiced as a doctor, and he painted. The equivalent of that is Scottolaro practiced as a local politician, even as mayor, and he wrote. And those two things together belong together like that. I was just telling Caroline, if you go into my, don't for heaven's sake, 3,560 emails and just put in Scottolaro, then they all come up together, the whole bunch that we've ever had on the subject of this extraordinary man. And I came back to an essay that was written in English by the local school in Tricarico about their local hero, their legendary local poet, Rocco Scottolaro. And extraordinarily, their English exercise, there it is written in fine English. And I lifted out of that this statement of intent, really, if you like, his feeling of what it was incumbent upon him to do as poet and political activist, to proclaim the beauty of each day to other workers. Now that's presumably come via Italian, his Italian, into this simple and very direct English. The office of poetry, you know what Amnesty's brief is to protect the human. The office of poetry is to say the human, to keep on saying it again and again and again. And what makes for good political writing in people like Neruda and Brecht and Darwish is that they actually indicate by lyrical force, by main force of the lyric poem, what it is you lose when situations become inhumane, what is getting lost. And as you see what might be lost or what isn't actually there, you get a better sense, a more passionate sense of what ought to be there, what ought to be safeguarded, and what poetry and the politicians, social forces altogether, ought to be agitating for. Scott-Laro actually did that. He indicated again and again, if you read these poems in English there and in Italian as well, they're lyric poems, that is to say they insist again on and again what it is like being human, being a human being in particular time and place. And out of that absolute specificity, particularity, the absolute abundant particular, minute particulars, as Blake calls them, out of those minute details comes the general application of it in our day now. One of the most gratifying things about this book, the poems coming in, the pamphlet published, and then the association immediately after that with Tricarico itself, with the Rocco Scotolaro Centre, and the Carmela herself came over to an event we had in the LRB. We suddenly fell in dealings with this, to us, remote place where they revered this poet, and we had him in English. In that sense, we were contributing to his good name. There are all sorts of further connections with Emilio Rosselli that Christina knows all about. Once you start to concentrate on this period, you see the richness of it, the abundance of these connections between people, and then so long afterwards, you know, now more than 60 years later, the connection that we now have with this book. A book is forthcoming now, out of the poems, out of the pamphlet. Smokestack are going to do a collection of Scott-Laro's poems in February of next year. So it's widening, and that's the great thing. Out of this tiny room now, it will further widen. Thank you for your attention.